Hello, sixth graders. We are continuing Unit 3A on simplifying fractions. Our learning target, I can write fractions in simplest form. Here's a vocab word you need to write down with the definition. Equivalent fractions. These are fractions that have the same value, but different numerators and denominators. Remember, numerators are the top number, denominators are the bottom. So some examples of this. 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4, 4/8, and 8/16. They are all equivalent. They have the same value. They are all equal to 1/2, but their numerators and denominators are different. And then same thing with 1/4 and 6/24. They're equivalent. They both have the same value, just different numerators and denominators. And we can find equivalent fractions by either multiplying or dividing the numerator and denominator by the same number. So for example, going from 1/2 to 2/4, we're multiplying numerator and denominator both by 2, so they're equivalent. And here we're multiplying both of them by 6, so then it keeps it equivalent. Another vocab word and some examples to write down are simplest form. This is when the numerator and denominator's GCF, or greatest common factor, is 1. So the only number that they can be divided by then is 1. When they have no other number that they can both be divided by, that's when we know a fraction is in simplest form. So a couple examples, copy them down. So we had 6/48. So we divided both the top and bottom by 2, making an equivalent fraction, 3/24. But that's not in simplest form because both 3 and 24 can both be divided by 3. So we divide again, and then we end up with another equivalent fraction, 1/8. But now the only number that they can both be divided by would be 1, and we're not going to do that, so our simplest form would be 1/8. 9/15, we can divide top and bottom by 3. You have to be able to divide the top and bottom by the same number. Do that, we get 3/5. 3/5, the only factor that they have in common then is 1, so then it's in simplest form. Okay, there's a lot here, so I'm just going to highlight the important things that I want you to write down. So fractions should be written in simplest form or lowest term. We always do that. We call converting a fraction to simplest form reducing the fraction to simplest form. So highlight those two, or write down those two parts that are highlighted. And then to reduce a fraction to simplest form, divide both the numerator and denominator by their greatest common factor, the greatest number that they both can be divided by. And a fraction in simplest form, the only greatest common factor then is 1. So write down what's highlighted. You don't have to write down all of it. And then let's write down this example. So we have 8/12, and we want to write that in simplest form. So to do that, we got to figure out what is the greatest common factor of 8 and 12. So they listed out the factors here for 8, the numbers that multiply together to make 8 and multiply together to make 12. And the biggest one they have in common is 4. So then we divided the numerator and the denominator by 4. That's the example, what they're showing down here. 8 divided by 4 is 2, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. So then our final answer is 2/3. That's the equivalent fraction, right? It still is equal to 8/12. It's just in simplest form. So write down the highlighted parts and the example. Okay, so write this down. We're simplifying 6/12. What is the greatest number that goes into both 6 and 12? So the biggest number that they can both be divided by. If we were to list out the factors of them, 6 would be 1, 2, 3, and 6. Those are the numbers that multiply to make 6. And then for 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. The greatest number that they have in common being 6. So I'm going to divide the top and bottom by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. Now the only factor they have in common is 1, so then we are all done, and there's our fraction in simplest form. Okay, at this point I would pause, try these examples on your own, and then come back and check to see if you have the correct answer. So 8/10, the greatest common factor that I can divide both of these by, I'm going to zoom in here, would be to divide them both by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5, simplest form. 9/12, the greatest common factor that they have is 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now, if you don't divide by the greatest common factor to start, we haven't had an example like this yet, but you might just end up with another fraction that can be simplified again. So just make sure that you always check that they have nothing else in common except for 1. 17 and 20, their greatest common factor, actually, since 17 is prime, right? The factors for 17 are 1 and 17. And then for 20, 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, they don't have anything in common. So this is already in simplest form. It's all done. The only factor they have in common was 1. 15 over 3, they can both be divided by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 3 divided by 3 is 1. This is an improper fraction. We'll talk about that more, but it's in simplest form now. Next row, 25 and 60. Well, I know they both can be divided by 5. So I'm going to divide top and bottom by 5. 25 divided by 5 is 5. 60 divided by 5 is 12. And then that's in simplest form. 9 over 31. So again, if we were to list out the factors for 9, we would have 1, 3, 9, and then 31 is a prime number, so it's just 1 and 31. So their greatest common factor is 1. It's already in simplest form. 9 and 36. Here's one. I'm going to start with 3, which you might have said, hey, there's a bigger number than that, but I just want to show an example for this. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. 36 divided by 3 is 12. And I say, hey, they can be divided again. It's not in simplest form, so we don't stop. We'll divide another time. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 1/4 now is in simplest form, which if we take 3 times 3, that's 9. So if we had just divided by 9 the first time, we would have only had to divide one time. 12 and 18, their greatest common factor is 6. And again, this is another one where maybe you had started with 2 and you divided, and then you found, oh, I can divide a second time. So just always keep that in mind. 12 divided by 6 is 2, and 18 divided by 6 is 3. That's in simplest form, 2/3. All right, 5 over 1, the only factor they have in common is 1, so that's in simplest form. And again, it's an improper fraction. The top number is bigger than the bottom number, but we will practice converting that in our next lesson, actually. 6 over 24, those can both be divided by 6. And again, maybe you started with 2, and then you would just have to divide a second time. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 24 divided by 6 is 4. 1/4. 52 over 100. Well, they're both even, so I know that they can both be divided by 2. And 52 divided by 2 is 26. And 100 divided by 2 is 50. They're even, so again, I can divide a second time by 2. 26 divided by 2 is 13, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. Now that's in simplest form. If you had just divided by 4 to start, you would have only had to divide one time. And 20 25ths, those can both be divided by 5. 20 divided by 5 is 4. 25 divided by 5 is 5. That's in simplest form. And there's all the answers. So check yours, make sure you have them correct. If not, fix them. That's all for simplifying fractions. If you're stuck, go back, rewatch the video, try some more practice problems. Otherwise, make sure your notes are in your backpack for school.